Hello and welcome to Global News Today here on Arabiya English with me, your host, Michal Prendergast. And coming up on the show today, we begin with a special interview with Roberto Sendoya Escobar, the firstborn son of the infamous Pablo Escobar. He's offering a rare insight into the life as the child of the world's most notorious drug lord. Then we take you to the sweeping greens of Scotland, where US President Donald Trump, he met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to discuss the continuation of the special relationship and Trump's favourite word, tariffs. I'm now joined by Roberto Sendoya Escobar, the son of the infamous Pablo Escobar. He's here to share what life was really like growing up as the son of the world's most notorious drug kingpin, and to talk about his book, his art, and his work raising awareness about the dangers of drugs. Roberto Sendoya Escobar, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to kick off this interview and ask, how did you find out, and what was that moment like when you found out who your birth father was?
Yes, it was 1989, and my adopted father, who was an MI6 secret agent operating in Colombia, we also had an office in Madrid, and I was living on the Costa del Sol in southern coast of Spain, designing golf courses with Peter Alice for an urbanization down there. And I was like, let me think, how old was I? 24 years old. Getting on with life. I knew I'd had an interesting childhood. Obviously, you remember things, and I'd had an extremely volatile, violent childhood in living in Colombia. But, you know, we didn't have the internet. I'd got on with my life, and I was living down there, and my adopted father rang me up and said, I need you to come out to Madrid. I've got some stuff to talk to you about. So I went up there. We had a nice long chat, and we went to see Full Metal Jacket, the movie. And he started to talk to me about stuff, and he basically broke it in easily, like something like, do you remember the guy we used to go and see him at Ian? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he slowly but surely started to reveal stuff. And then he said, well, of course, that guy was your father. And I'm a grown-up, so I understood adoption and who my father was, but we didn't have the internet. You can't just Google, oh, Pablo Escobar Gaviria, and just suddenly know everything. We didn't know anything back then. We just relied on the newspapers and stuff like that and what we heard on the news. So I didn't really know I knew what a drug dealer was, but I didn't have this. I mean, if you mention Pablo Escobar to someone today, they'll know instantly who you're talking about. But back then, we didn't really know anything. So it wasn't a dramatic shock. It was a shock to me that the guy that we used to meet, who used to put his hand on my shoulder and say, mi hijo, my son, and that turns out that he was my father. This started a conversation which went on right until my adopted father's death in '93, which is the same year as my real father died. And he was taking me through my life, basically. Does that help you a bit?
What are your first memories of being in Colombia?
My very, very first memories are just fleeting glimpses of a milk bottle on a windowsill and some lime green paint peeling off a wall. That's some very early memories. And later on, my adopted father explained those things to me, which I wrote about in the first chapter of my book in great detail, because they're very early memories that had no explanation behind them until I had these conversations with my adopted father many years later, in 1989, and we started talking about these things and what they meant. And also, I still do a few, but I used to have a lot more nightmares and woke up screaming and all this sort of stuff and couldn't sleep properly, and I had all these sort of problems as a child, and it is all to do with the violent start of my life. And so, to answer your question, the memories aren't whole memories. They're violent noises and sights that I saw. I mean, I still remember today, I don't know if you've ever seen someone be shot in front of you through the head, but it's a horrific experience. And when you see that right in front of you as a child, you kind of, you never forget that. It's the lack of animation in the human body as it falls to the floor and the blood spurting out onto the wall behind. You never forget that sort of thing. And this is, the drama and the trauma that I grew up in as a child.
And how did it come about that an MI6 officer adopts the son of Pablo Escobar? Is this a usual event? It seems a bit of an unlikely story how an MI6 officer, he adopts the son of Pablo Escobar. It's rather extraordinary.
Well, truth obviously is quite often stranger than fiction, but truth is also, much more interesting. We don't have the time to answer that question in great detail, but effectively, Pablo Escobar wasn't a big drug lord or anything. He was a hoodlum in a gang, but later, when they needed to convey, being the people that ran this operation that I talk about in my book, Operation Durazno, which was a secret operation to try and discover and control the cash flow. You try to imagine that the narcotic drug itself wasn't the problem. The problem was what to do with all the cash and how to deal with the cash. Normally, cash returns back to the country of issue through banking systems, and there was hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every week disappearing out of the American banking system into nowhere, and nobody knew where it was going. So they set up this operation to try and deal with that. And so to control the business in some way, shape, or form, I don't have all the answers, obviously. They gave the main routes through Panama to this hoodlum who became later, thanks to them, this big, powerful, mass murdering drug lord who people seem to revere today for some reason. But the control of that business, or most of it, to know where the money's going, you have to be sort of involved in it in some way, shape, or form. And that's what this MI6 operation was doing. And so that's why they set up the armored car business and all the rest of it. And when they found out later that one of the children, or one of the boys, young men that had escaped from that shootout, was this guy, and he had a kid, and they had his kid adopted in this English family, it all sort of worked out very nicely. And when they were they used to take me to Medellin and sort of, put me there at his table and that sort of thing. And sort of, it was almost taunting him. And he did try to get me back, but that failed many times.
And in your book, Son of Escobar, Firstborn, you said that knowing that your birth father was a mass murderer, it had a large impact on your mental health. How did you handle that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not proud of it, but millions of us do it. I had a bad year. 1993, my wife died of cancer. She had a brain tumor. My adopted father, who I revered and loved dearly and respected, died of motor neuron disease. And then at the end of the year, the guy that was my father, real father, he shot himself in the head before they could get him. So he couldn't be extradited to America. And so it was like a weird thing, but it was a kind of closure. But my brain kind of collapsed mentally. And I started drinking a lot. And I became a real heavy drinker. I'm not proud of it. And I had mental health depression problems, manic depression. And I ended up on the ward at St. Peter's Hospital in Surrey, a mental health unit there. And they helped me a lot. They put me on the drugs that stabilized me. And then this is years and years ago. And eventually I gave up drinking, and I, stopped smoking and just started behaving myself, and started playing rugby like I used to when I was younger, and started getting fit again. But that took 3, 4, 5 years. But I had some terrible, terrible, terrible problems, and I got through them. It's a miracle. I got through them, but I'm here to tell the story.
It's great to hear that you're in good health now. I heard you say you revered your adoptive father. What about your actual father? Did you love him?
No, to be honest, I met him, I feared him, I was scared of him. I didn't know really who he was. They said he was, it was a very surreal experience for a child. It wasn't till later that I began to realize who he was and how he dealt with people who wouldn't do business with him, and he'd have their families dragged out onto the street and murdered. This is not a nice guy. Recently, as you may notice, I've done some portraits of him for an art dealer in Jersey called Superlux. And what I'm trying to do is portray the person person that he really was. He wasn't a nice guy. In this portrait, I'm portraying him as he's tried to become a politician, and he built some 750 houses in the outskirts of Medellin to buy the votes to get into as mayor of Medellin, which succeeded. But, if you didn't do as he asked, this was not the guy that took no. It was plomo or plata. You take my money or I'll kill you. And so I can't revere a guy like that. Everything I do today, my paintings are utopic. When I talk to people like you, I try to make sure that people understand that I in no way can possibly glorify what he did and how he behaved. He was responsible for the mass murder of many, many people. I can't condone that in any way, shape or form. Not proud of it.
He tried to buy you back in a sense as well. There was many kidnap events. Run us through those.
Well, not all of them, but I can, one night I was in my bedroom in Bogota, in our house in the 14, and the maid came up to the room. My parents were obviously out, and she came up to the room and she was shaking. I was reading a Tintin book at the time. I do remember that. Tintin in the Congo, if I remember correctly. And it was, really imprinted on my mind. And there was a man standing behind her with the bandages around his head, like a sort of bandages you get when you have a sprain from the hospital. And they were wrapped around his head, and there was blood coming out of the bandages, which I had nightmares about for many, many years. And she was crying, and she said, "We need to go with this man." And as they turned, he had a gun in her back. And I ran to her arms, and I was obviously distraught. I must have been about 6, 7 years old, I guess, something like that. And we went down the stairs, down to the hallway. And as we got into the hallway, I just heard this incredibly loud noise and smoke everywhere in the hall. And this was the sound of a Magnum 38 going on. And this person just dropped to the floor. It was just, you can't begin to experience it. You can't imagine what that's like. My ears are like, and the maid ran off into her room screaming. And I looked down, and there was this guy with the bandages on the floor, and there was blood everywhere. And, sorry about that, not the thing. And there was blood everywhere. And my bodyguard, Barandiga, had come in and shot this guy through the head. Quite extraordinary. When I look back now, I think I don't know how I managed to stay half sane after experiencing that. And there are lots of there are several attempts like that. Eventually, my biological father had my bodyguard who killed quite a lot of the people that came for me. Eventually, he had him killed. I went to his funeral. My bodyguard was like a friendly uncle to me. We were friends. He was by my side all my life as a child, and then he got killed, which was a shame. And when he got killed, my adopted parents decided that I would be sent to boarding school in England because it was just too dangerous. And that's when I started my boarding school life at St Hugh's in Oxford.
And speaking of psychopaths who were a huge part of your childhood, you probably seen a different side to them at times when there wasn't violence. It must have been quite a dichotomy of, you've got your father who at times is a loving father and yet he's a mass murderer. It's very hard to process, I imagine.
Well, almost impossible. I mean, and now I'm a grown up with my whole life behind me. I'm 60 years old. I understand a lot more. But, when you're going through life, you're trying to work it out. It's almost impossible to understand Gustavo Gaviria, who was the other kid who escaped from that house, him and Pablo, they set up this regime, which we now call the Medellin cartel. It was a loose affiliation of killers and drug dealers. I used to meet with Gustavo. I've got a picture of me sat on his knee, and he was the nicest guy you'll ever meet, but he was a mass murderer. If you didn't pay your bills, he'd have you taken out the back. Your throat would be slit, and the tongue would be pulled out, and you'd drown in your own blood. These were not nice people. They were absolute psychopaths, but they could be really. It's really weird. I almost find it difficult to find the words to describe it. horrific. Certainly not an experience that anyone really wants to be part of, to be honest.
And what happened on the day that Pablo Escobar was killed? How old were you?
Oh, well, I mean, this was 1993. You could work it out. I was born in 1965. I was in Walton-on-Thames, looking after my wife, my first wife. She'd had an operation to remove a brain tumor. They hadn't been able to remove it all, and I was nursing her in a house that we rented in Walton-on-Thames in Surrey, quite near where my adopted father had a house. And I was watching the TV. Watching the news, and it came up on the news. You know, I was shocked, but also relieved, but shocked and relieved, shocked, relieved. You know, I'd had a hell of a year. I've got that wrong. My wife had died that year. So I had been nursing her, that's correct. And then I was on my own with the children, that's right. And they'd gone to bed and I was watching TV. Such a long time ago, I forget all the sequence of events. But yeah, so yeah, she died in July and this was November the 2nd, I think. Effectively, they tracked him down using a sort of triangulation because he used his satellite phone, and they found him in a barrio house outside in Medellin. You know, idiot. He just thought they might not find him. I don't know what he was thinking at the time. But the special forces shot his bodyguard dead immediately, and they shot him in the leg. Because they didn't want to kill him, they wanted him extradited to the UK, to the US. It was part of some deal that was going on, and he wouldn't give himself up. So they shot him again. I can't remember where they shot him. I think it was in the hip or somewhere like that. But he wouldn't go down. So eventually he pulled a revolver and stuck it into his ear and shot himself because he was not going anywhere and he knew the game was up. So that was the end of him. You'll hear lots of other stories. My half-brother and I don't agree on anything, right? We don't like each other, but we agree on that. He always said that he would never go to America. If he got cornered before they got him, he'd shoot himself, and he did. So there you go. That's the end of him. And the world's a better place without him. But the drugs business today is much, much bigger than it was then. It's properly organized. It's so endemic in society that it's pointless banning it. You know, we have to deal with it the same way we deal with alcohol. You know, it's a horrific drug. Alcohol kills millions of people every day around the world. So we can't ban it. So we just have to license it. So I don't know. This is my idea. I haven't thought it through properly, but you know, you can't ban it. It's just ridiculous. It's everywhere.
And in terms of your half-brothers, you said you don't get along. When was the last time you spoke with him?
I haven't spoken to him personally. I emailed him about 6 months before I published the book because I needed him to understand that I was going to be publishing a book. That's it.
Would you like to meet with him? Would you like to reconcile?
Not really, no. I mean, you know, I have no dealings with my Colombian family, and I don't want to because I don't know where they are in the whole issue. You know, it's a dangerous thing. I'm quite happy here, painting, getting on with my life. And if I do interviews where people want to know about my life in Colombia, I'm happy to talk about it. But I'm not going to reveal any part of what went on back then. And what went on back then is a much bigger thing today and has caused the death of millions and millions of people. So it just can't be a good thing. And I just won't condone it. But I have to get on with my life, and I've got on with my life. I'm an artist, and I try to, in some way, make some kind of amends. I mean, obviously I can't, but you know, the sales and money from my book go to help, you know, disadvantaged children. I don't make money from that. Support many charities, and my paintings are utopic. How I'd like to see the world.
And in terms of your sister as well, Manuela Escobar, when was the last time you had contact with her?
I have not had contact with her. She's been treated very badly by the rest of the family. She had mental health problems as well. People ask me about this. It's just not something I'm interested in. Simples really.
And anyone else from there who who may have worked with your father that you've sought out. Do you ever sought to go back to Colombia and meet some of those people?
Look, it's I don't know how to put this, but you don't understand. My half brother had to sneak into Colombia when he did some documentary thing in a car through the border somewhere, or have some special permission or something or other. It's too dangerous. You know, half the world revere you because your father was a drug lord, and the other half hate you because he killed some relative of theirs. You have to be very careful. And going back to Colombia has absolutely, you know, I have no inclination to go back. What for? I can do interviews with people like you from here. I don't have to travel anywhere. Colombia is, you know, it's a dangerous place for someone, or members of his family, to go to. You know, my uncle Roberto is in Medellin. You know, I don't know if you've seen his face recently, but you know, he got a letter bomb sent to him, and his face got all manged up. It's a dangerous situation to go back to Bogota, Colombia. It's not a sensible thing to do, and there's no reason to do it. You know, it's a big old world. You can live anywhere you want. My adopted family lived in England. I became an Englishman, if you like. My Colombian half family, if you like, they don't live in Colombia. Only Roberto and his lot. You know, the siblings all live in different parts of the world. Manuela doesn't live in Colombia, nor does Sebastian, or Juan Pablo, however he wants to call himself.
And I can see all of the paintings. I really don't want to spend most of them.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to spend my interview talking about them because there's no advantage to people. They won't learn anything from that.
Of course, of course. We're going to move on to that now. So,
thank you.
I can see you've got some incredible paintings in the background. Was this a way to, I suppose, immerse yourself in something cathartic as a way of healing?
Yes. Yes, definitely, absolutely, 100%. You know, millions of people, well, you included, me, and everyone on this planet will go through a period of time where they experience the death of a loved one or some tragedy, and it will cause an imbalance in chemicals in the brain, and you'll get depressed. You'll have bad days, and everyone goes through this. Some people worse than others, right? And you have to deal with these things in some way, or if you don't, you'll end up very ill. And, you know, a lot of people end it because they can't deal with it. And I've been right there, I've thought I wanted to end it on occasions. So when I was in the, obviously I've always liked to draw and stuff, but, you know, that doesn't make you an artist. When I was in the mental health unit, they encouraged me to work on my art as a kind of therapy. And I'd never thought about it like that at all. And so I started that, that thing. And they also said, if you can, try and learn an instrument. So I picked up the drumsticks, now I've got the drums going and I'm painting and earning a living out of my artwork, which is a great privilege. And thank you to everyone who's bought my artwork, because without that, I wouldn't be eating, I don't think. So, yeah, it is therapy. And it is, when you have to concentrate the mind on what you see, turn it into movements in your hand, and then create these paintings, you're keeping your mind very busy, and you're making neural pathways in a different direction to the old memories. And slowly the memories become worn out paths, and the grass grows over, and you don't have to walk down that road again, which is partly why I don't like talking about my Colombian family and other stuff, because I don't want to wear that path again back into my mind. I need to concentrate on music, stuff like that. And the only reason why I'm doing these portraits, and there's only 2 of them at the moment, I might do one more maybe, is because it's important also to educate people on the bad side of someone who they might think was a hero of some description. I wanted to sort of counteract that.
And how can people view and actually purchase your paintings?
You can go on my website. You can go on, I've got a Shopify page and that. These 2, there's 2 of these portraits there. I'm not selling those. They're being sold by Superlux they're from Jersey, and they'll be advertising very soon. I think there's going to be a big launch in London, so it's going to be good. You better buy, limited edition prints. But yeah, my paintings themselves, like the one you see behind me and this one up here, you can buy those by contacting my agent through my website, which is robertosendoyaescobar.com. simple, really.
We know the legacy of your biological father. What would you like your legacy to be?
That's an amazing question. You know, very few people ask me things like that. I'd like to be thought of as someone who tried to leave a positive imprint on the world before I die, rather than a negative one. It's very easy to lose your temper, hit someone, they die, they fall over, they die. You know, then you've contributed negatively to society. I want to contribute positively. When I've died, I want people to think, you know, that he wasn't such a bad guy. He did some good stuff. He helped a lot of children along the way who were orphans like him. You know, that sort of thing. I need people to understand that love and caring for others is much more important and much more rewarding than hatred and violence, which we really do need to, you know, try and resolve if we can. And I can't tell people to do that without setting an example myself, which is really difficult because, you know, being a Colombian, I've got a bit of some hot blood in me, you know, and when someone annoys me, I have to bite my tongue. It's very difficult, yeah. So, yeah, I'd like to be remembered as someone who left the world in a slightly better place than it was when he was born. Something like that.
And speaking of legacy, there is one, I suppose, a hangover of your biological father's, his time in Colombia. He brought in hippos. This is a story that that's been covered extensively in the news again and again and again. It's an ecological a disaster, as it were. He had pet hippos. After he was killed, they're expensive to keep. They were just released.
Tigers, everything.
So all of these hippos now. Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah.
So all of these hippos were just released, and now there's, I believe, over 2,000. The Colombian government, they don't know what to do. There's campaigns. They want to shoot them. What's your opinion on what should be done with them?
Well, you know, this is just a classic example of the sort of legacy that I don't want. You know, he's left a terrible legacy on the world. Millions of people addicted to cocaine because of the business that he was involved in and turned into a big business. Now he's left his country with an ecological disaster, apart from all the people who are traumatized and always will be of what happened to their families and their great uncles and what have you, who've been murdered and slaughtered. He's left this terrible legacy, you know, which is something else. What can you do? You know, if you start culling the hippos, you'll get the hippo Save the Hippo Society or whatever it is. That, you know, you've got to cull them like we do with deer in the UK when there's too many. That's the only solution. But they are huge, you know, massive, you know, massive creatures. You know, they are enormous. Then you've got to shoot them. What else are you going to do? But then if you shoot them, you know, other people hate you. But you just like, something else he's done that's negative. You know, I can't think of anything that he's done that's positive. I mean, I just can't think of anything. It's crazy.
He brought you into the world, and that's a positive thing, because you're a well-reasoned and actually a very nice gentleman. It has been a pleasure speaking to you. We're going to have to leave it there. So, Roberto Sendoya Escobar, thank you so much for your time.
Hasta luego.
And now we turn to the latest on the Trump-Starmer meeting held at President Trump's Turnberry Golf Resort in Scotland. Joining us there is Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas, who was on the ground. Greg, thanks for joining us. This was a monumental meeting. It's Trump's second state visit to the UK. How happy was President Trump to return to his mother's homeland?
Yeah, I think he was thrilled. He's very fond of the United Kingdom in general, but specifically of Scotland. You know, he has two properties there. His mother is from there. So, you know, this was a really great moment for the president. And I think he really enjoyed the trip so far anyway, especially up in Turnberry.
Turnberry does have a special place in his heart. We know that golf is a huge part of his life as well. He finds it very cathartic. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he's famously teetotal. Is this his, I suppose, this is his outlet, isn't it, golf?
Yeah, definitely, Michal. I mean, I saw him finish out his round on Sunday. So we kind of just stood at the 18th green, and you could just tell he really enjoys it. You know, he takes it quite seriously, but I think he also uses it as a social vehicle and a diplomatic vehicle. And so, he really enjoys it out there. And I think it's a time where, people can get one-on-one time with the president. And very similar to, what I've noticed about having a career here in America on Wall Street, where, golf is a big part of finance. It's a big part of business in general here in the States. So, and not unusual for a president to embrace golf. And I think most of US presidents have, but I think it's particularly important to President Trump.
And as you stated, he just opened a second golf club in Aberdeenshire. He doesn't show any signs of slowing down. How much are his sons involved in the carrying on of the Trump brand?
Oh, 100%. I mean, especially Eric Trump, who is basically running the business. I think Don Jr. is quite involved still, but Eric has done a great job running the business in his father's absence, and he'll continue to do that. So yeah, it's an important part of the economy as well, and good for the Trump organization for injecting capital, for creating jobs in Scotland. And, I talked to a lot of the people working at Turnberry. They all absolutely love the family and love working for the Trump organization. It's nice to see.
And you were there on the ground. How was the reception between Team Trump and that of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK?
Yeah, so I left before the prime minister arrived, but I did watch the entire press conference. I was switching planes in Dublin and did some media from the airport, and so I did watch the conference, and it was just amazing how it actually looked like President Trump was welcoming Keir Starmer to his country, hosting the prime minister at his resort. Turnberry is pretty spectacular. And the energy there on Sunday, I was there most of the day, Sunday and Sunday night. The energy there was just incredible. So it's not just President Trump, it's also, his team. There were a few cabinet members at the club. Stephen Miller was there, but also some cabinet secretaries, like the Secretary of Commerce was there. So it's a real energy. It's a real display of energy in Scotland, and I think everyone had a great time.
And what's your assessment of Trump's and Starmer's personal relationship?
It's really a good one, and it's a good question, Michal, because they're obviously on opposite ends of the political spectrum, so you wouldn't expect that. But I think both President Trump and the Prime Minister have done a good job, kind of rising above the politics and developing a really good relationship. I think Keir Starmer's done a great job managing the relationship. The president has been nothing but diplomatic and friendly to him, and you saw to his wife during the press conference. And I think Peter Mandelson in Washington has done a good job. The UK ambassador to the US has done a great job with the relationship. So it's obviously an important ally for the US, both economically and in terms of defense and security. So I think both are going to rise above any political differences, and then occasionally politely mention some things they disagree on. And you saw the president do that regarding the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He talked about the tax on farmers right now, the inheritance tax on farmers, which I think the president, strongly disagrees with. And he and J.D. Vance, the vice president, have brought up, some of the freedom of speech and censorship issues over the last 6 months. So, they're able to overcome some differences of opinion and just keep the relationship going, and not only the personal relationship, but I think the relationship between the two countries.
And someone he has a bit of a frostier relationship with. He was also visited by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, where, of course, it was Trump's favorite word. I'm sure it was on the agenda, and that's tariffs. What was the feeling on the ground as she arrived and as they went into that meeting? Yeah,
again, just total optimism. I think I know I met with a few people that were in the meeting and as well as in the press conference, and there was a real energy, some real optimism. Remember, they didn't announce the trade deal until after the meeting and after the press conference. They said it was 50-50. I didn't really believe that because I don't think they would have teased the audience with that if they didn't have every intention of announcing it. So, good for the president. It was a great deal for the United States. I think it shows that the president is dead serious about our European allies, especially our NATO allies, sharing some of the burden, and you saw some really good outcomes from that meeting. And again, just like with the Prime Minister of the UK, I think the president has some real ideological and political differences with Ursula von der Leyen, and was able to overcome them to get a deal done. And the president's not a big fan of the EU. He's not a big fan of multilateral organizations in general, and he prefers bilateral trade agreements. But I do think he executed a great deal with the U.S., the largest trading partner of the United States. So good for the president. I think it was a great outcome from Turnberry.
And something he's also not a big fan on, and that's big fans. He spoke extensively about his hate of wind turbines. How did that go down?
It went down really well because the president, always uses some good humor in some of his arguments. He referred to them as windmills instead of wind farms or wind turbines. So, making light of it a little bit. But no, I think that's pretty consistent with U.S. energy policy right now. The president's managed to get rid of all the subsidies for wind and solar, or at least a lot of them, not all of them. But he's really sort of done away with a lot of this net zero nonsense, which never really was popular in the U.S., much more popular in Europe, obviously, but it never really became a big issue in the U.S. It never cracked the top 5 in terms of issues that were important to voters. But the Biden administration went ahead with a lot of that nonsense anyway. And I think that was just another example of being tone deaf and not listening to the people, to the voters. So I think, you've seen what happened with net zero policy in Germany when they were completely dependent on very inconsistent wind and solar, as well as Russian natural gas imports. And you saw what they went through a few winters ago. And then in the UK, where UK businesses are paying 5 times the amount for energy, 5 times more than U.S. companies pay. And even in the UK, they're paying 40% more than German companies pay. So it's really unsustainable. And I think it's one of those things where President Trump was quite critical of the UK policy and talking about the windmills. But I think it's because he wants what's best for the UK. He wants to renew that economic vigor that the UK used to have. And so I think he's looking out for the best interests of his allies. That's why he wants a stronger NATO. And that's why he wants energy policy that these countries, and especially the people and businesses in those countries, can benefit from. Remember, 20 years ago, in 2005, the United Kingdom was energy independent, if you can believe that.
It's certainly not that way anymore. It is rather unusual that a US president is there to speak so heartedly on the domestic policy of a foreign ally. Is this something that he must be getting his news, he's obviously focusing on this. He really cares about this, doesn't he?
He really does. Yeah, it's a great point. And again, I think, he wants what's best for our closest allies, for the allies and trading partners of the United States. So if he sees things going terribly wrong in a country, I think he cares enough about those countries. Yes, there's some self-interest there. We want our allies to be strong. We want NATO to pay their fair share. So there is some self-interest. He is transactional. But on the other hand, he is, as I said, he's very fond of the UK, and he wants what's best for the people in the United Kingdom and the other countries in Western Europe as well. So, I think he's quite right to bring up some of these points. And again, the policies are often quite in contrast to the best interests of the people. The people are putting the number one issues as mass migration or illegal migration and the cost of living. And yet all you hear from the government is, censorship of so-called misinformation and continuation of destructive net zero policies. So, I think that's something the president has every right to discuss with his trading partners.
Agreed. And just finally, Greg, are you a golf player yourself?
Not a good one. In spite of working on Wall Street for my whole life, and I'm probably the only one who's never cracked 100, or the only one at Turnberry on Sunday that has never cracked 100. So, very important to American business and to the president, but not really my game.
Have you played with the president?
I have not. No.
Not yet.
No. Yeah. Someday, I hope.
There's been a video doing the rounds on social media. I think Trump was getting a bit of unfair criticism. There was a video of a caddy, he dropped a ball, and obviously Trump is 80 and he's on his own course. He's not playing at the Masters. What was your opinion of that video?
Yeah, I thought that was a little much. I mean, look, these people will do anything they can to criticize the president. And then when you look at his track record in just 6 months, he's just accomplished so much. So if you're going to try to nail him on putting a golf ball in the wrong place, good luck with that. I think the voters don't really care.
Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas, thanks so much for your time. That's all we have time for on Global News today. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.